So we might have a little problem. Little problem in Standard right now. The lights are flashing and the sirens are blaring.
Are they flashing red and blue?
Distraction makers.
So we had a little bit of data coming out that is suggesting that Izzet Cauldron is breaking the Standard meta. This is coming off of the back of one of the most extensive bans in Standard history. They banned 8 cards or something. It was a lot. Seven cards. Including eliminating the dominant deck at the time, like the previous Standard tournament season was Mono Red Aggro with Monstrous Rage and the Mice crew. They banned a bunch of cards from that, and then they banned what they thought would become dominant with that deck out of the format. But then meta shifts. We see Dimir mid-range at the top for a little bit, and then in comes Vivi. Return of the Vivis back.
Once again.
And this time in conjunction with Agatha's Soul Cauldron.
Agatha's Soul Cauldron's a 2-cost legendary artifact that says you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to activate abilities of creatures you control. Creatures you control with +1/+1 counters on them have all activated abilities of all creature cards exiled with Agatha's Soul Cauldron. And that's not all. You tap it to exile target card from a graveyard. When a creature card is exiled this way, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Vivi is 1 and an Izzet. Legendary creature wizard has a 0-cost ability that's never broken. Says add X mana in any combination of blue and or red, where X is Vivi Ornitier's power. Activate only during your turn and only once each turn. And then it also has whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Vivi Ornitier, and it deals 1 damage to each opponent. And it comes in as a 0/3.
I forgot that it also deals 1 damage to each opponent.
Not quite as relevant, I think, in this version. More relevant, I think, in prowess.
It's still pretty relevant.
It's good. Yeah. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, but it doesn't. Cauldron doesn't give the triggered ability; it only gives the activated ability. So
yes.
The way that the deck works basically is you get Vivi into your graveyard, and then you exile it with Agatha's Soul Cauldron, which means that any of the creatures that you have in play with a +1/+1 counter on them gain Vivi's 0 activation cost ability, meaning that they can generate blue or red mana equal to their power, and the snowball effect sort of takes place where you have a creature with a +1/+1 counter, gains the ability, you add mana to your mana pool, playing another creature that somehow can get a +1/+1 ability or a +1/+1 counter, or pass it to another creature, whatever, and then that creature can be activated immediately because this ability doesn't tap to produce the mana, and you just kind of continue chaining together in this sort of combo-esque way. It's sort of a non-deterministic combo, which is a phrase we've become familiar with. And you just generate a lot of mana, generate a lot of card advantage. So we're talking about the play pattern of the deck a little bit, and it's actually pretty similar to how Nadu worked, right? Nadu is a 3/4 flying creature for 1 and a Simic. Whenever... and then it also gives all creatures you control, whenever they are targeted by a spell or ability, you can reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land, you can put it into play. If it's not, you get to draw it. And you can do this twice per turn, because that'll stop this problem from happening. So basically, you would then have something that targets your creatures for 0, and you would just go around targeting all your creatures, generating tons and tons of mana in a non-deterministic combo kind of way. The play pattern that's quite similar here is that this is what's called goldfishing, which is where you are taking a ton of actions that your opponent doesn't really have any way to interact with, and your opponent is just watching you, right? In that your opponent might as well be a goldfish, is where that saying comes from.
So if we were to compare Universe Beyond sets to normal sets, the pressures that they have from Universe Beyond sets is that there's these existing characters that are sort of not so much set in stone. We don't know how they're going to function mechanically in Magic, but there's expectations that players have on them. And if that particular character is being showcased in a way that doesn't feel impactful enough by the players, then that's going to be a bit of a letdown. So you want to make sure that these characters that people know and remember are going to have enough of an impact that it's exciting. And I think there are some cards that have had a better balance with that. It's significantly easier to be able to have those designs in Commander-only products. because the format's just significantly different than standard. But when we're seeing it now trickle into standard, now that Universe Beyond is starting to go into standard, we're seeing cards like Vivi, where they wanted to make Vivi this very, notable character that people liked, have this particular level of power because that's what felt right for that character, and it just happened to go, I think, too over the top, potentially.
Well, and we've seen Wizards sort of adjust some of their design decisions around like what makes for a like a chase card, right? Where, even in Final Fantasy, we had the sort of the Chocobo, like limited edition cards, which I think for collectors become the chase card. It's interesting that they haven't quite made the decision, I guess, yet that is enough of a chase to sell the product versus making cards that are also very strong. In the past, we've definitely seen them lean into like, well, how do we make strong cards that people want to play with? This is something we've talked about quite a long time ago, that like without the sort of standard rotation, right, really having it, being able to turn over the soil of a meta, when a card comes out, you're competing with all of the other cards that came out before it, right? So Commander being an eternal format, you have to power creep stuff enough that people care about the new stuff that's coming out. Otherwise, they're just going to be like, okay, whatever. I've got cards that are better. We're seeing, again, like we talked too about how Universes Beyond might be able to battle some of that with people just wanting to play characters that they like. And so you can kind of like get somebody to play a suboptimal card because it's a character that they like Sephiroth or something. But I don't know. It's interesting to see them continue to push power creep in this way when I'm not really sure that they need to.
What's tough is, yes, they need to cater to Commander players, and they obviously need to have every set work within a limited format, but they also want a set to have some level of impact on Standard. Probably serves some sort of a function to shake up the metagame, because regardless of whether the majority of players play Commander or if they're trying to cater to collectors, Standard feels like it's not doing so hot. It's definitely not. I think it's third most popular format right now, maybe, if that. And if that's the case, like they need to make sure that there's cards that are still going into Standard that are making it relevant and shaking up the meta, or else they're going to be losing those players even faster. Every set that goes by without any sort of a meta shakeup from the newest cards just means that Standard players don't have to buy the newest things, and they didn't get new toys to play with, basically.
It seems like they're definitely trying to serve too many masters with Standard, right? Like, or just with the game in general, right? Like, we saw sort of them, okay, well, cards in a booster pack are designed for draft, they're designed for constructed Standard play, and then they sort of bring in Commander, and it seems like at this point, Commander has started to crowd out the cards that would have previously been designed for Standard, which is sort of ironic given the fact that like Commander has vastly different design incentives than what Standard does, but Limited can sort of exist on its own a little bit, has a little bit more forgiveness for these kinds of things because you can put them at higher rarities and then they just don't show up in Limited that often. I think it is a bit ironic that this mana cost is so similar to Nadu, because I think there's kind of this rule of thumb that like, okay, well, if it costs 4 mana or more, it's a Commander card. And if it costs 3 mana or less, it's a Standard card. And you could like follow that rule, right? But what keeps happening is as they sort of power creep Commander, 4 mana starts to become too expensive for Commander. And I think that trend will continue, right? So we start pushing the mana cost down. You kind of end up in this scenario where it's right on that edge of like this costed effectively enough that it's going to impact the Standard metagame.
It's tough to tell what cards are being designed right now for Commander versus Standard. Previously, it was almost easier to determine, like if you're drafting, like, okay, this card was meant for like the draft format, or
and rarity limits that stuff pretty easy, especially Mythic rare.
Sure, but now I feel like, yeah, the majority of Final Fantasy cards you could read through and go, okay, that seems fine, this seems fine, this seems fine, and then you get to something like Vivi, and you're like, what the fuck? Like, was this made for that? And especially, not to speculate, because I think Gavin Valentine is a very good designer. I think he's very competent for sure. But like, when he was addressing questions about Vivi, he did bring up there might be some CEDH viability.
Oh yeah, I forgot. Yeah, even like I mentioned that.
When he mentions like that as quickly as he mentioned it, like it makes me concerned that was potentially a thought, right, or even intention with the design. It's trying to find something that, oh, that probably won't break standard, or maybe it'll be good in standard, but maybe it'll fit this. You know, you're trying to literally get a thread through like 3 to 4 needles. You know,
right. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about design incentives for Commander. The most obvious is that so you have 40 life and 3 opponents. And that means you need to, if you're going to like try to win through damage, you need to do 120 damage to win the game. You could kind of look at that as being the most, like the strongest force that's kind of informing the design of Commander cards. But in a way, it actually separates the two formats in an interesting way so that like aggressive like burn decks really only kind of function in standard. You don't necessarily need to take up that design space trying to design a burn spell for Commander. You can kind of leave that in standard space.
That doesn't stop them though.
So I think the other set of incentives here is the one that is actually influencing especially Vivi's design more. 2 things. One is that you have an incentive to make sure that a card does a lot all at once, because you only get 1 turn and your opponents will have 3 turns before you get another turn. So you want to feel like you had a substantial turn. The other incentive here is that because Commander is a singleton format, it's much harder to design in a way that you can know that players will be able to have 2 cards together that synergize together to create a more powerful effect. And so you design a card that does basically all of the enabling and the payoff within the 1 card. And Vivi is a perfect example of exactly those incentives.
You need to play Vivi and just cast a cantrip, basically, just 1 mana cost spell to buff Vivi, to then use Vivi, to then cast another one.
In a Commander environment, it's harder for you to get like 2 cards that match up together to do something synergistic. So you design a card that just does a lot of stuff, so you don't need to do that. But then when you come back in the standard or regular constructed 4 copies of a card environment, you end up with the ability to do that much easier. So we get something like Vivi and Soul Cauldron combining together to do something extremely broken.
And I feel like it's really indicative when you end up seeing the cards that it's like it has 1 effect and then another effect and then another effect.
Yeah.
And like really if it has, you know, a gap between those 2 effects, that might be fine. But if it's got 3, it's like, oh, you're trying to do like everything. You're trying to make sure they can do the thing, which is like fun. Yeah, I love being able to play Glarb, look at the top of my deck, be able to play a land, you know, and
do
then
something immediately.
Right.
There's a lot of pressure to make something that can happen with this thing that you just played immediately, because you got 3 other opponents to get through before you get to have another turn. And it's extremely problematic for 1v1 formats.
Maybe what is rubbing me the wrong way, and probably other players as well. I feel like a lot of players have kind of had the general feeling of like, why is Wizards doing this? Why do you keep printing Commander cards into these standard sets? Because we have these very clear separation of there's the Commander products and we have the standard products, right? Or, you know, standard with limited, whatever. And the thing is just that the other formats aren't popular enough to, I think, keep up with the newer stuff. And so it's not just about selling only Commander products. If you want the game to still exist within Modern, within Standard, and with these other formats, you kind of need Commander to make sure that, in a way, that the lights are on. And so if there aren't Commander cards in general play boosters, then there's not enough of an audience that is willing to go and buy these general play boosters to make up for that, right? As opposed to if there's just enough Commander cards in there, then players are going to go after it.
We just talked a little bit before about how like you know like sort of speculator / collector culture like taking over the thing that is generating all the money theoretically could decouple like the design incentive to keep power creeping the cards to get players that really just want to play the game to keep buying the game.
Collector boosters versus play boosters is the attempt at that.
Right, and this is what basically what Pokemon has done is like you can play Pokemon pretty easily like as far as getting a meta deck is concerned, and then most of the money coming in is coming from collectors. But like I'm just not convinced that like, you know, Hasbro is going to be like, well, we're going to leave some money on the table here and make sure that the game is as good as it can be. You know, like that doesn't seem like decisions that have been made prior to this point do not add up to that being the outcome.
The reason probably why they wouldn't come to that conclusion is honestly just because they can point at these other games, is that they can compare themselves. They are on the same shelves as Pokemon, as Yu-Gi-Oh, as all these other IPs that can get away. Yu-Gi-Oh, I know a little bit less about their collector versus play culture, but Pokemon as an example is Pokemon's probably their greatest competitor as far as card games go. And if Pokemon can do it, why can't they do it? And I think that they probably can. I'm sure a lot of people at Wizards are smart enough to figure out the differences and why they probably cannot do what Pokemon does. But that's not going to stop them from trying, right? There's a major incentive, if I were to guess, internally for them to try and reverse engineer and figure out their own path to work towards that sort of Pokemon model, whatever that looks like.
The incentive is not there for them anymore to put standard first. So they're going to ensure that like Commander players are happy and be less sure that that standard players are in a healthy meta. Like that's just what it is, right? Like the driving force here is that Commander sells the product better. So I think it's also really strange because the culture has been so wrapped up in standard and competitive play and like all this stuff being really viable in Magic. And I think especially a lot of franchise players have like that's been how they've known the game. That's how I've known the game. And then like sort of coming to terms with the fact that like you're not like standard, constructed Magic is not really the target audience for the game anymore, I think is very strange to try to like wrap your head around and what that means for the game going forward. And like, I'm not saying that designers don't care. They clearly care about the game. They want the game to be good, but they're also not blind to the fact that there's just way more Commander players out there. And like those are the people that they need to satisfy to sell the game at this point. And not to mention like the relationship between casual Commander players versus tournament competitive standard players. Like it is a vastly different, like tournament players are much more adversarial to the game's design than casual Commander players are. Like we probably wouldn't even hear about Vivi if it wasn't for standard, right?
Right.
There's
yeah.
no Commander, Commander players aren't like this card's insanely broken, right? Like it's not.
I mean, they were when it first came out, but they're on to the next thing because.
It shows up. It's like kind of showing up in CEDH a little bit, but like again, nobody.
Yeah, there was some speculation, but I don't
audience.
think it. Yeah, I don't think it got anywhere.
Hasn't really done anything. All right, so what do we think? Is this the death of standard? Is it over?
We're almost there.
Yeah. I think so.
I'm very curious to see how next year goes because the weird thing is that like the couple of Magic IP sets that we got this year were like pretty solid. Like I wasn't a big fan of Dragonstorm as far as mechanically how it functioned. There's a handful of cards that made it into standard. But it was generally seemed like a positive set for players. Edge of Eternity's, funny enough, is the opposite. I liked a lot of the mechanics, but it seems like there's...
kind of a dud.
Yeah, kind of nothing with the player base. At least they're not talking about how well Edge of Eternities is doing in that Hasbro call.
Yeah, no joke.
But otherwise, like, the sets have been, like, pretty positive. I think pretty good additions to Magic's IP specifically. And I think they've learned a lot of lessons from last year with Murders at Karlov and Outlaws and all these, very specific story-driven sort of sets. So I don't know how that's going to lead into standard, but I'm assuming unless Wizards can sort of, if they care, to recenter the game around some sort of a competitive format, more than likely it's probably not going to be around standard in the future.
Yeah. I mean, I could honestly see them just shutting down all of the competitive scene of Magic. I'm not convinced that they even need it at this point. It almost feels like just this legacy thing that they're keeping around. We'll see. I mean, maybe they want to revitalize it, but there's a lot of other competitive games that used to have major like esports things that are just they're not there anymore. They closed it all down. So, I just really don't think that the incentives are there at this point, right? Like it's much more difficult to make sure that you're balancing all this stuff and designing it well for a really competitive environment. The player base is constantly trying to break the game, which is like, I mean, yeah, that's how you play the game competitively, right? The majority of people that are buying the product are Commander players, so I just don't know how the game doesn't just continue to shift more and more in that direction. I just don't see it. I don't see the incentives.
Over time, more and more formats have been developed. A lot of them not even officially by Wizards, but they've decided to sort of cater to some of those audiences, and Commander being the biggest one. What's funny is that if they were trying to emulate Pokemon, it's almost an impossible task because Pokemon essentially decided the majority of cards in our set do nothing and are just...
Yeah.
It's just more cardboard or, fun illustrations, collector items, except for a handful of things that might end up seeing some sort of tournament play. And it gives them way more freedom for design and way less things to concern themselves with, because it's very binary at that point of this is something that we're going to try and design for to see play, and this is something for the collectors. And like when you're able to divide it very clearly like that, but your audience, the general audience, is totally satisfied with that being the results of what you're doing, then yeah, you're hitting the sweet spot. But Magic, its roots are in the gameplay.
Yeah, and I think, as a longtime Standard player, it does feel a little strange, right? Because it's like, well, this is why I played the game, right? I played the game because it was a really good game. It was mechanics first. It was gameplay first. And now to see that sort of shift happening, it does feel a bit alienating. It feels like almost a bit like, I don't want to say like taking advantage of a bit, but it does feel a bit like part of the reason why Magic was able to survive and maintain for so long is because of a really dedicated player base. And so now it feels like, okay, well, Magic, we got you to this point, and now you're like you're off, abandoning us basically. It can't. I shouldn't say like the game owes us anything, because it doesn't, but like it does feel a bit like that it, like sort of we've been abandoned, as players that really cared about the gameplay quality. It's not to say like Commander's bad or anything. It's just like you don't need to be as perfect designing for Commander, which honestly gives design a lot more breathing room. Players that sort of took the game seriously enough to think, like, to play the game as a career, right? To be pro tour champions or whatever, right? Like, it does feel strange to kind of see that left to sort of wither on the vine.
I mean, but if we look at the trajectory of any sort of a corporation or business,
it makes perfect sense.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll see.
It's not surprising, but it is sad.
Yeah.
If you enjoyed listening to us talk about Izzet Cauldron and why it might...
Is it?
I say Izzet.
That's fine.
If you enjoyed listening to us talk about Izzet Cauldron, please feel free to give us a little like and a subscribe, maybe a comment down below. Let us know, do you think Izzet Cauldron is a problem?
If you want to join our Discord, you can find the link in the description. Thanks for watching. We will see you next time.